Also provided a preview of what Birmingham hopes will become Britain's first Monaco-style Grand Prix race.
It was a day of great cars, Bugatti, Alfa Romeo, Mercedes, and great names, such as Sterling Moss and the 5-times world champion Juan Manuel Fangio. The organisers had hoped the event would take off in a big way. It started in suitable style. An American rocket man, his backpack designed for flying on the moon, landed at the grid just before the fuel ran out. A wave of the flag and a 1908 Austin got things moving, or at least most things. It's reckoned at least 50,000 people turned out. It cost them nothing. The rally had been staged to welcome the motor show to Birmingham. Those in charge now feel it could pave the way for the city's own Grand Prix.
Cars in the world. This is just a taste of what could be happening in Britain in the next few years. A street racing event to parallel the great Monaco Grand Prix. Well, if this is the sort of thing you enjoy, stay with us.
The International Motor Show once again at the National Exhibition Centre here in Birmingham, and already the city is celebrating in style. For yesterday it welcomed the fastest men in the world with their high-speed racing machines to its streets in an event which could become part of British racing history. For this magnificent motorsport spectacular, the Chequer Bitter Classic could be the harbinger of a future Grand Prix here in the capital city of Britain's motor industry. And the mastermind behind this rather exciting event is Martin Horn. Tell me about this, because it's quite a big day, isn't it, that you had this weekend?
It most certainly was, and I think the people that turned out must have gone away thrilled with the quality of the cars and the drivers and the whole razzmatazz, which shows that we can put glamour and colour into the centre of our city.
Now, how many cars did you get altogether?
Well, we had 160 racing cars actually in the 8 separate grids, and they covered something like £4.5 million worth of some of the rarest machinery that we could get right from across Europe, with the drivers taking them around the streets.
I'm pleased to say you brought along some of these magnificent machines to the Pebble Mill. So let's take a look at the Pebble Mill show now, just for a few moments. And in fact, you're starting off with quite an old racing machine, aren't you?
Yes, the racing machine that we are starting off with thrilled the crowds yesterday. This is the Alfa Romeo Monza, which is a superb example of the sort of car that was driven by the famed Italian drivers Tazio Nuvolari, in the events like the Mille Miglia, the street events of yesteryear, which of course were very exciting and made motor racing history. Talk to any Italian and he wants to talk to you about the Mille Miglia. And amongst them, of course, we had this incredible machine from Porsche, the 956, 255 mile an hour, over 600 brake horsepower in the tyre. That's equivalent to about 50 mini cars. And David Hobbs, the Englishman, who is now the American IMSA champion, driving this John Fitzpatrick Racing Porsche. And of course, John is an Englishman as well, from Birmingham originally, now settled in San Diego. But look at that beautiful, the lines of that car now against this, the historic Maserati. No, they brought out the Alfa. Oh, now this is the one that really excited them yesterday. This is the Alfa Romeo 159. This is the rarest car that we had. It came from the museum in Turin. Baron Toulo de Graffenried came all the way from Lausanne to actually drive it. He raced this car in the late 1940s and early 50s, and look at that magnificent car. And I tell you, I'd love the viewers to be able to smell the smell that comes out of it. Then the hill climbers. What a day we had with those guys, because there is the fellow that came second, Tony Southall, in the British Hill Climb Championship in his March Atlantic single-seater. The crowd absolutely went bananas when they had the champion Bolsover there and Roy Lane. And we also had several other cars. Now look at this Maserati 250F. Sterling Moss drove this car, Fangio drove this car, and one of our giants, Roy Salvadori, also drove it. And now here it is for Alan Cottam to bring into view. You can see the difficulty, not like the modern racing cars nowadays. They have very little lock, and Alan is going to drive that car away from us. He still races this in British historic motor racing, and you can understand why people get very excited when they see the beauty of these cars, the colour, the thrill, but then link it with the names like Banjo and Moss and Roy Salvadori, and you can understand why they went down in motor racing history in a very, very big way. Then, of course, we saluted Porsche again with John Watson, the Grand Prix driver, who's flown all the way from Fuji in Japan, having just won the 1,000 kilometres race for the Rothmans Porsche team. A great win for him, having this year been unable to get a Grand Prix seat, but has come back with a very big bang by going to Fuji and showing the World Endurance Champion drivers how to do it. That's the sort of man John Watson is, from Northern Ireland, of course. And here we have another Maserati 250F, beautiful car. And again, relate this one to Alan's. This is slightly older than the Cottam car, but equally has the difficulty of very little lock. So when the drivers arrived at the hairpins at Monaco, they used to have to slide them into the corners, full opposite lock as it came out of the corners, full power on, and the drivers hanging on and thrilling the crowds, etc., etc., etc.
You still feel the vibrations, I think,
I'm sure
even
you
though they're
can,
not gone.
I'm sure you can. And these cars, of course, if they wouldn't have any problem with this corner if they'd approach it at 130 mile an hour, because they would just slide into it, turn the wheel the other way, and then power it out of the corner. And that's the exciting thing about motor racing. I think, and that's what thrilled the crowds yesterday, to hear the noise, to see the thrill of it and the colour.
But you have even bigger plans, haven't you? And I know to even start with the idea of having perhaps a Grand Prix here on the streets of Birmingham, you even had to have a referendum of the locals, didn't you?
Yes, the plans are to bring a historical first to Birmingham, to Britain. It's never happened on the city street before. And when you consider that Monaco's been doing this since 1929 and getting all that world television, I think that the time has come for Birmingham, the capital of the West Midlands motor manufacturing industry, to have the benefit of something that will create a major publicity, promotion and tourism project. That's what we're looking for.
So if all goes well, how soon might it be that we have a Grand Prix in the streets here in Britain?
Well, Marion, we're calling it road racing. We have to be very careful. There's a very strict book of rules laid down by the RAC. We must run, first and foremost, 2 successful international road races before we can think Grand Prix. But road racing is what we're going for. If we get the Royal Assent by June, July of 85, I want you to be a guest at our motor racing in 86.
I shall look forward to that. Martin Holden, thank you very much indeed for the time being, because we'll go back inside for a moment, but we'll be meeting some of that. But let's go outside now and join Josephine, who I think is getting to know some of the cars and the drivers a bit better, those magnificent racing machines that were making such a noise a few minutes ago. Here they are now.
As Marion said earlier, we have with us today some of the most famous names in motor racing. And with me now is Roy Salvadori, who until 1965 was one of the most famous Formula One racers. Roy, welcome. Now, I believe you have a flat overlooking the Monaco racetrack.
I have.
What's that like?
Very noisy during the race, as you can imagine, but we can see practically 60% of the circuit from the flat.
What is it that makes street racing so popular and so successful?
Well, it's much more interesting for the spectators. They can get very close to the cars. You've got a lot of background buildings, and you see so much more than you would from an artificial circuit. It's very much more popular for spectators.
If it happens in Birmingham, which we hope it does, do you think it'll work?
I think really it's got to work. It's different racing. It has a following, and I'm quite sure it'll be successful.
Thank you very much indeed, Roy. And now I shall be talking to our British contingent, who are made up of David Hobbs, Innes Ireland and John Watson. Gentlemen, what do you think about the possibility of having a circuit race in Birmingham?
Well, obviously street racing is the in thing these days. America's got 3 active street races, not all of them Formula One. One Formula One, one for Indy cars and one for GT cars like the Skoal Bandit here. And it certainly is a way of attracting people. They're very charismatic. There's a lot of ambience at a street circuit, much more than can be reproduced at a road circuit like Silverstone or Brands Hatch. But there's obviously problems with having them, you know, safety and logistically. And
because David, you're a commentator, aren't you, in America for CBS?
Yes, right.
Are these very popular in America, street circuit racing?
Well, we covered the Dallas race, the Dallas Grand Prix, which was actually in a little fairground, not actually in the streets, and we did the Detroit race, and they both this year got good crowds and good reactions too from the local populace. Very good.
Innes Allen, what's your view?
Well, this is the third on the streets affair that I've been to, and Martin's a very determined fellow. I know he's got the Birmingham Council people behind him, and I just wish him success when he goes to Parliament. I don't see why we can't have racing in the streets if we observe all the safety rules and regulations.
John Watson, you've just completed an endurance race in Japan and won it, 1,000 kilometres. What's the difference between that and street racing?
Well, the race in Japan was on a purpose-built circuit, and of course it was a race that lasted for almost 6 hours. And what is being planned for Birmingham is a Grand Prix which really is about an hour and a half, just like any other Grand Prix that you see televised every other weekend. So I think the prospect of racing on the streets on a road circuit in Britain and in Birmingham really is taking you back to the history of motor racing, because originally motor racing and Grand Prix racing took place on road circuits, and it was really in the 30s and 40s and 50s when more and more permanent racetracks were being built that street circuits went into a demise.
And now I'm talking to somebody from the very old guard of motor racing, Baron Toulo de Graffenried, and also an extremely famous gentleman, Sir Jack Brabham. Welcome, gentlemen. What do you think about the race possibly happening in Birmingham?
Well, I think it's a wonderful idea, and my friend Martin Horn has also a very good idea. Of course, I met him in Dubai in one of his organizations. It's the first time I come here, but what I found, which is wonderful, the enthusiasm of this organization.
Now, Mr. Sir Jack Brabham, I believe that you've been very unkindly, or you were very unkindly referred to as the old gentleman of motor racing, and you decided that you'd live up to that name once. Can you tell me what happened?
Oh, that was at Zandvoort, actually, when I turned the age of 40, and the press were giving me a hard time by saying that I was the old man of motor racing. So I got a beard and a walking stick, and I went out to the car on the starting grid with a beard on.
Gentlemen, one final word. It's the final next weekend in Portugal of the World Championships, and it looks like it's a very, very fine line between Prost and Lauda. Who do you think will win?
Well, that's a good point. I think personally perhaps Prost is the quickest driver, but I think Lauda is probably the driver with the experience behind him, and I think that might pull it through for him.
What about you, Baron Toulo?
Well, I think the same as my friend Jack. Of course, Prost is the fastest driver also, and he's the youngest.
But Niki Lauda
is still young, but I think normally he should deserve it also. Why? Because after his fantastic accident he had in the Nürburgring a couple of years ago, to make such a comeback, I think he should also deserve it. But
well,
difficult to say.
We'll wait and see with bated breath. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Okay. Thank you.
A brief peek into the world of motor racing there.